What's up, y'all? It's your boy Showtime Doctor. Kamusta kay? Ayos lang po salamat. Po no po. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. I just promised I'd do it before a video. Alright, so we got some news. Usually I ignore the data mine stuff, because I know you guys love to speculate and do all that, but I've been really burned in previous games with data mining where it's like, oh my god, this OP thing's coming! And then the dev's like, oh, you think it's OP? Nerf. Or, just kidding, guys, it was someone making stuff up, but whatever. People like to know things behind the scenes, it's just the way culture is now, so. But you guys have been impressing on me so much to make a video about Sid again, just for useful characters in that dungeon, because as we were doing it, we had dual Morrigan, dual Rue, and Elektra. But even with a friend unit, you can't do that as a solo player, because you're not allowed to take dupe characters in. So you're going to need some recommendations, and I'm here to make them for you, so here we go. Number one, already mentioned Morrigan. Morrigan, her thing is... The pros, usually when she ults, she's not going to kill something, so this will be on a 5-turn cooldown, and it hits pretty hard. For 2, there's lots of AoE, in the last part at least, on the 3rd pack. And just in general, this is a great turn. Getting dots and bleeds up is really good. Her 1's always solid. She has tons and tons of damage amps, basically. She has a self-revive, a berserker, which... could be worse. The only issue Morrigan really has in this dungeon, besides her role is to die, is the guaranteed counterattack whenever she's berserking, because the equivalent of mental seal is in that dungeon. For those who don't know, does 50% of your life as damage whenever you do something that isn't defend. Pretty much everything in this dungeon can cast that, and... so any type of counterattack, by the way, that is one thing you're going to have to do if you want to take some of your main stained characters in there. Get rid of your counterattack, as much of it as possible. Obviously, it's still going to happen because there's a base 5% no matter what. And there's passives such as this that guarantee a counterattack on some characters. It's just the way it goes, so. But in general, Morrigan's great, especially if you can't field 5 fire characters, if the majority of your team is fire. Then you're going to go ahead and get this attack by 40%. And so Morrigan is definitely recommended if you have a Morrigan. Callie, if you have a Callie, why are you even watching this video? You should already have a Sid, you should already have a Morrigan, so you probably know what you're doing, but I'm not even going to go over Callie's skills. Callie's definitely a take if you have a Callie. Now Nyx, I'm not that familiar with Nyx. I've gone over her skill set. It's very curse and debuff dependent. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in this dungeon, because passive damage is one of the better ways to do damage in this dungeon, because so much of the time you have to pass your turn, or you're dead, etc. So, we can get in there. Damian. Damian's situational. If you have a really well built up Damian, the cool thing about Damian is he gets buffed every time he evades, and his leadership is 25 of 8 for fire, so... possibly consider that if you are running a team and you don't have a full fire team. Evading an attack in that dungeon is pretty solid. And he gives himself some buffs. And he also decreases attack, which is nice, because most of the stuff in the dungeon hits very hard. Pretty high chance on a stun. And his AoE 3 target here. AoE damage in this dungeon is going to be very crucial as well. Marduk, let's talk about Marduk. Alright, we're done talking about Marduk. So then... Rebecca, I'm sure she'd be fine. Not great, but fine. Sid. You know, I'm not sure if Looming Death works on most of these guys, but if it does... Sid, I said Sid. Sinclair, my bad. Skill Claire. He hits really hard. This makes him hit really hard, and if you skill up his 1... you get a higher chance to hit for bonus damage, and then the 2 puts a brand on. Brand is really sexy in this dungeon. His 3 hits all enemies on a 6-turn cooldown, that's not bad. This will put Looming Death on people if he's under 50% with his 1. And I guarantee you he's going to be under 50% a lot, so that's something possibly. I just don't know what Looming Death works on. I know for sure it probably doesn't work on the final guy. The snakes could work on the snakes. Stun and sleep work on the snakes. I've seen that. Or not the snakes, sorry. The the spiders. I'm not sure about the snake either. That would actually be pretty huge if you can get Looming Death on the snake. But never tried it, so. But St. Clair wouldn't be a terrible hero. Ramuh is actually underrated in this dungeon, even though she is a wind unit. We once, someone forgot to change their hero on the Sid multiplayer dungeon, so we went in with a Ramuh and 2 Sids, and, oh no, my bad. Ramuh, 2 Ruse, and 2 Morrigans, which was kind of funny. It was our tank. And you know what? We were 1 hit away from winning, so. The cool thing about Ramuh is Stun Honor 1, which can help. This one decreases debuff duration by a turn, which usually they got poison on them, and they also have mental seal, so that's pretty nice. Although there is an anti-healing debuff in this dungeon as well, and it lasts up to 5 turns depending on who puts it on you. And the revive, you know, useful in pretty much all cases. Now this helps, but like I said, it's mitigated by the poison and the anti-heal debuff, so not as useful as it could be, but still useful nonetheless. And then self-revive is always good in a dungeon encounter. So actually underrated. You can take a really buff Ramuh if Ramuh happens to be one of the characters that you worked up. So that's it for the White Knights. Now Dark Knights, Nemesis. If you worked up a Nemesis, the thing that's going to make you Nemesis good, she's fire. All fire units are dealing 30% more damage to everything in there except the snake. The snake is actually dark on the second pack. So, Dark Orb, 1, you know, it's whatever. This, if you haven't have been skilling it up like I've been recommending for a couple weeks now, you can get up to 3 orbs and then 40% crit chance. Yeah, even if you got it to like up 2 or 3 times, that's pretty good. Extra crit chances, extra crit chance. Critting in this dungeon really matters, especially on Morrigan ults, etc. For those wondering what Dark Orb does on Nemesis, gives her extra damage the more you skill it up on her ultimate. Also increases her passive damage right here. You don't have to deal with revive mechanics in this dungeon, but she does put on anti-revive, so she'll be dealing more damage there. Not a bad hero. If you happen to work her up, go for it. Morrigan is one I was thinking about. Morrigan would work really well if you're running a team with like either Kane, Nyx, or Sinclair, and you happen to have, although in theory this group wouldn't work because they don't have a healer / reviver. But if you happen to have any combination of Kane, Sinclair, Mary, Nyx, and Cheshire, the free unit in the laboratory. The cool thing about Mary is she's going to do lots of AoE damage. So her 1 is a 2 target, her 2 is a 3 target, and her ulti on the 7-turn cooldown hits everybody. Unable to be revived, so her and Nemesis have a little bit of synergy, even though she's dark. And then every time someone dies, she's restoring health, and lots of people are going to die in this dungeon, guys. So, and a self-revive, you know how that works. Get up and nuke a little harder. Hopefully you got a Dispel to get rid of the Curse of Spirit Calling. So if you got a Mary worked up, it would work. You could do that. Now Demos. Problem Demos has, Demos is water. Demos is going to be... Wait, am I doing that right? Yeah, because Sid's wind, so most of the stuff in this dungeon is wind, so Demos is going to be taking an extra 30% damage from almost everything in the dungeon. But, you know, removes buffs from the target. No, I don't think that works on the snake, unfortunately, which is too bad. You know, Dark Warrior, that could actually be pretty good, because you could get rid of Mental Seal and Poison and put on your DPS just before the ultimate. That could be good. Veil of Phantasm would actually be fantastic, because a lot of stuff in this dungeon, in fact, I think everything hits at least 3 targets at some point. And Sid himself, regularly, it's not uncommon, once you get up, if you're fighting the final boss and Sid has, say, 2 or 3 clones up, it's not uncommon for him to hit everybody twice. Dark Sid, rather. So, Demos would be solid, except for that he's water, but hey, if you got a really well-built Demos, you know, you got that passive revive, that could work out. Now, Ashley, unfortunately, I'm not going to say don't bring Ashley, because the cool thing about Ashley is he can always do damage because of his 2. It's a dot, 5 stacks of it. Basically ticks for 100% of his damage on everybody for 3 turns. You skill it up. He gets more from the buff on his crit strike chance, crit strike damage. But the issue is he's mostly single targets, so multi's really great. Not to say that he can't be good. He can definitely be good. And you got a really well built up Ashley, hey, he's going to burn Sid really hard at the end. So that'll be really nice. And our defense is obviously pretty good too. So I'd recommend Ashley, but only if you have the proper mitigation and support around him. And your AoE damage is more paramount though, so that's kind of a soft recommendation. But Ashley's Ashley. Ashley's one of the top DPSs in the game, so can never really say no. Now Breton, people have Breton. Breton would actually work out pretty well against the Snake in the second phase, especially. But the problem is he's also going to increase multi, and if your person has mental seal, they're going to kill themselves if they do a multi per chance. Like, say you want to do something just to kill something real quick, and then, oops, they multied. But he is also going to increase AoE damage, so if you're running an AoE heavy team, you can consider him. Black Bullet's going to passively buff his damage based off of this here. You can get my look. Personally, I would say you really need you need heroes that do, if you're going to run Britain, you need heroes that can take advantage of Dangerous Omen, so basically 5 target skills. Which, of course, most of the dungeon is 3 target, but the last one can be 5. AoE clear is really nice on the last part of this dungeon. And then the Kane here. The Kane, I would say only bring him if you're in a curse heavy team. The cool thing about the Kane, though, is he does crit. He auto crits. Hold on. He auto crits whenever his life is under 50, and guaranteed his life is going to be under 50. Good chunk of the time here. But if you haven't been building him up, if you have a curse meta team, yeah, he's going to do some solid damage for you, and he has an all hit with penetration damage. Not that they ever have shields up, but those curse ticks. So if you happen to just run, like if your curse team happens to be just him and Mary, that's going to hit pretty solid. You throw in maybe this guy, some supports and a tank, it's up to you. Elektra is a solid recommendation for this dungeon. She's fire. Her dot, since she's tanking, her dot is actually going to do a good amount of damage in this dungeon just because so many things will be hitting her. You want her taunt to be as high as possible. Her 2 is actually very life-saving in this dungeon. So, you get that up, go ahead. If you happen to have that skilled up, or even if you don't, it still works out very well because it basically absorbs. Even if your character is mental sealed, you can attack with it and the shield will absorb the damage. So it'll work out. And this hits all enemies, so this is really nice. Decreases attack as well. Pretty much all tanks, if you're doing PvE, you got decreased attack on your 1. And her attack also hits up to 3 people if they're right next to each other. Good for the final part of this dungeon. This is an extra dot that's going to tick. She has a little bit of recovery. And the only issue with her, guaranteed counterattack upon critical strike damage. If she's getting crit a lot, she's going to counter. If she has mental seal on while she counters. 50% of Elektra's health. The good Elektra is probably going to have 15k at least health. So you're looking at 7,500 damage on a guaranteed counter, unless she procs damage immunity or has Fire Incarnate. But otherwise, she's a solid recommendation. If you're running 5 fire heroes, definitely put her as leader for the 60% additional damage. That'll go a long ways for you. Alright, so let's look at honorable heroes here. I'm trying to think of Mina. Mina, I'll say this. Mina only run if you're going to run Surdic, my opinion. She does some good. She has a good chance to charm on her 1 and a 2. You can charm the spiders. I'm not sure about the snake. I highly doubt you can charm the snake. You can't charm Sid, at least not main Sid. This right here, it's a multi-target, but it depends on how many Foxfire Spirits she has. She gets 3 at the start of the wave, so that's cool, and then she has chance to get it. And she has a self-revive, so could be good, but I'm not going to recommend her necessarily. Mayoral. She's fire, so that's the thing that's working for her. If you happen to have a fire team, all her hits are AoE. But keep in mind, since all her hits are AoE, she's also going to be eating a lot of counters. You know, her 2 ignores defense if the target's branded. She's brand synergy, so if you happen to have a hero that has brand, yeah, consider taking her. AoE damage in this dungeon is not to be underestimated, for sure, as I've kept mentioning. And yeah, if you got her ultimate here, extra brand, that's pretty good. When attacking a burn target, inflicts additional damage. Targets should be burning if you're running a fire-heavy team. So she's a recommend if you've been running her a lot. Trying to think. I did kind of recommend her. If you happen to need another fire support, or not fire support, dark support for your curse team, this is one. The only issue with her, though, is she's more of a shielding support. Every time she crits, she also has a snare. Every time she crits, gonna go ahead and cast Veil of Phantasm upon a random ally. Veil of Phantasm, it's basically Deimos shield. Those of you that got Deimos. Evade attacks for a turn. Can be really good. Strike preparation has a chance. The more you skill it up, it eventually goes to 100%. Basically makes it so that you're gonna crit, and she's also curse meta, so not sure if you really want her, because you really need like a good revive support in this dungeon. So not gonna recommend her. Esna. Only reason I'd recommend Esna is if Mental Seal works, which I'm not sure. Otherwise, she's water. She's taking 30% more damage, but she's also critting more, because every time she gets hit, she has a chance to put up Esna's Revenge. And if you kill somebody or you use the ultimate, you're going to put Mental Seal on at least the spiders. Not sure about the snake. Not sure about the Sid clones. I've never seen it done. Penetration damage doesn't really matter. There's no shield mechanic I can think of in this dungeon. So, you know, if you got a really well built up Esna, possibly. Karen's actually a solid recommend, as Mr. Mavis told me in the chat here. The reason that Karen's a recommend, even though she's water, she's taking additional damage. Pretty much, you know, a little bit of healing over time. Hopefully the person's not poisoned. On the lowest person at the start of her turn for 2 turns, 10% healing. And her turn comes more quickly when allies' HP drops below 30, but only once per battle, though. But it can still help you out. Basically, you could get off that cleanse, or the extra healing, or whatever you need to haste. Reduce cooldowns. And then Cozy Abundance, a target's going to revive 1 time. If they die again with Cozy Abundance, they're going to revive again. Once per battle. Nothing burns in here, so you don't have to worry about that. So, you know, she's a solid recommend just because she's such a great support hero. Not necessarily because of her element. Now, Ruby. Only thing that's going to hold Ruby back in here is she's single target. Otherwise, cooldown reduction. If you got her 60, she's going to be healing herself a lot. And hopefully, although there is anti-healing debuff in this dungeon, so that's going to stop that. And she's going to remove buffs from... By the way, this was recently clarified. This is not remove defense and attack buffs. It's a bad translation. It is remove buffs from defense and attack type characters. So, I can't recommend her too hard, unfortunately, because she is mostly single target. But if you need some hard single target, that's going to work. Kane is a solid do not bring him in this dungeon, just because there's no healing mechanic for him to rage up off of. Unless it's hidden. Serdic, the only reason to bring Serdic is he is one of the bonus units if it's going to be like it was last time in the Sid Advent dungeon. I believe it's cooldown reduction. He reduces cooldown reduction 1 or 2 turns, whatever it is. He himself, unless you're running a charm meta, is not going to be that useful. Charm does work on the spiders, so... But unfortunately, nothing in here is female, including Sid. So there's going to be less of a chance. You can put Blind up. Blind's not a bad debuff. When you put your Rose Crest up. Rose Quest you want it up because he's going to be dealing additional damage to people with Rose Crest. And he's going to take decreased damage once you have his 60. And increases attack whenever something's charmed. He's charming instantly if anything has Rose Crest on it with his ultimate. His ultimate hits in a cone, 3 targets, so that's pretty cool, except the only time you're going to hit something with a cone is on the final encounter, unfortunately. So, but you know, charming the spiders early is not going to be a bad idea after 2 turns, because 2 turns is when they start really doing their damage usually. So Cyrodiil's a solid recommend, if for nothing else, that he's one of the recommended heroes. Rue, highly recommend. The cool thing about Rue, you have her 60. She's removing 1 abnormal status every turn, including the stun that Dark Sid puts up, including mental seal, including... I don't think if there's anything else. I don't think she removes poison. That counts as a dot. Remember if there was another debuff in there, but anything that goes up, most of the time she's going to remove it. And has a self-resolve. Decreases all X cooldowns upon death. Odds are she's going to be dying a lot, a decent amount. Removes damage, immunity, and shields. I don't believe... I know there's not shield. I don't believe there's damage immunity. I could be wrong, though. And revive. Clearly useful. This one... This is cool because it grants abnormal status immunity, so it's going to be harder for them to put mental seal. And I believe the stun as well for 2 turns, so that's actually highly recommended. And, you know, the base heal. You can also get rid of the no healing debuff. That might be the one I was thinking of earlier. And her 1 has a chance to remove buffs, which there are some things with buffs in the dungeon, and every time she removes buffs, she has a chance to heal, or she is going to heal. So, Rue's a solid recommend as well. Ellie's an interesting case. I could see taking Ellie because that has Brand on her 1. Brand gonna make you hit things 30% harder. 2, she has a chance to put things to sleep, including the spiders, and it's not a cone effect, it's a 3 target. So the first 2 encounters, you're fighting 3 targets. First one's a spider. Now that I'm thinking about it, the first encounter is a cone effect. So all the stuff I was saying about it's only cone at the end, it's cone at the beginning as well. But sleep does work on the spiders, and decreasing attack is a good debuff as well. You can also talent this so that it puts up poison and... I forget what the other debuff was, but there's another one you can put up. And then this puts a mark up, hits 3 targets. Mark, gonna deal additional damage whenever something else is hit. So that's all good. And then passively, she can heal and decrease her damage taking, give herself a 100% buff. Heals herself for 40%. And also, decreases caster's skill cooldown by 1 and allies cooldown by 1, and restore HP to 20% of all allies when defending. So that can be really good depending on poison, but usually if you defend with her, she's not, even her self-heal is not going to damage herself if she has poison on her. And I believe that also works as well for the party, so Ellie's a solid recommend. Abel, the crazy thing about Abel is he offers the same type of healing thing that Karen does, except not for 2 turns, and only, it's not a HUD, it just happens at the end of his turn. This is going to make you immune to damage over time effects, Butterfly Wings, so that's pretty cool, and it's automatically up if you have his 60 every, at the beginning of every round of combat. Wings of Protection, that's cool, and it casts a very solid regen depending how much you keep it up. For 2 turns, it's going to be restoring that much HP, so it's pretty solid. Abnormal status immunity on his 3, but it's a 7-turn cooldown, so it's pretty rough. But hey, if Abel happens to be one of your heroes you've worked up and you need another support, maybe that would work out for you. Now Sid, obviously if you got Sid, you probably know what you're doing, so don't need my recommendations. But Sid is also a recommend if you have Sid, just because Has a revive, has a ridiculous shield he puts up if he gets 3 of these fluttering feathers. Has a self-revive, some damage immunity, critical strike chance, and attack for 1 turn when allies hit HP drops below 30, guaranteed it's gonna happen. And has a chance to remove it, or not a chance, does remove 1 debuff from 1 person whenever Sid uses his 1, so Sid's a solid recommend. Lifa, oops, I clicked Tayo. Lifa is also a solid recommend. Lifa is a bonus unit. I don't know what her bonus is, but I believe it is... It's either increased damage... Well, I guess I shouldn't speculate, I just don't know. But I know Lifa is a recommended unit if it works out like it did last time. Cool thing about Lifa, she can get you a clutch taunt if you need it. Hits deceptively hard. For 2, arguably the best group buff in the game. More you skill it up, it'll go up to 40%. Increase all allies' attack by 20, critical strike damage by 20, decrease allies' damage taken by 20, so that's really good for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Ideally, it'll be up almost every turn unless she has mental seal on her. Ult hits pretty hard, has a high chance to stun, additional damage if enraged. She gets enraged if 2 people die, which I guarantee you 2 people are going to die most of the time. And she's going to go ahead. She heals herself at the beginning of the turn, but every time she rages, 40%. It's once per battle, so, but 40% attack, 30% crit chance. She has a resolve. When she resolves, she restores her HP a good amount, guaranteed multi-strike upon counter. Can be good, most of the time it's good. So Lifa's a solid recommend just for the bonus, and she's fire synergy as well. Tayo's gonna have a rough time in here, unfortunately, because guaranteed counterattack. Right here, whenever his HP goes 50 or below, once per battle, that can get you killed. Hot-blooded instinct, gonna crit a lot. You know, you can use this to lower the counter chance and buff your team. Actually, one of the few places where that is recommended if you take Tayo in here. 1's gonna hit really hard, depending on how many hot-blood instincts you have. And then 3, high chance to stun, decrease damage, so... Tayo, you can take him, but just realize he's going to be getting hit harder. He's going to dish out a good amount of damage, though. You just got to watch his mitigating factors. Jacqueline, I don't know Jacqueline well enough. She's Win. I know she's debuff, and she does a hit every time something has a debuff on it, so... Possibly, she does do lots of sleep, so that's pretty cool. If you have a really built-up Jacqueline... But most people build their Jacquelines for PvP, so she's not going to be doing the additional talented boss damage, etc. But your results may vary if you got her. Give her a try. Edwin, I mean, he does have... Apparently he removes passives, but I do not know if that works on PvE mobs in general, or if they even have passives, and if they do, does it work? Pretty solid self buff on this too. Decreased recovery amount, nothing in this dungeon recovers. So Averted Signet eats up a little bit of damage. Silence. I think silence works on enemies, basically prevents them from doing their AoE attacks. At least the spiders. Yeah, I don't know the hero well enough, guys, to recommend Edwin, but that's there for you if you want to. Now here's an interesting case, Claude. Claude hits multiple targets, so that's really cool on his 1, decreases attack and taunts. On his 2, sleep is a viable debuff in this dungeon. On the spiders, brand is always solid. 3, basically, for 2 turns, not only does it put out Looming Death, which I'm sure probably works on the spiders, gives himself Dirge Ghost Girl. From what I know, nothing in this dungeon has pierce penetration damage, but, you know, it could be something does, and I've just never put up a similar... But I've never seen anything hit, because we did take Saya in one time. So, nothing hit her while she was on Ghost Girl. So... If dispelled, I don't think he can be dispelled in that dungeon. So gonna regen health based on his health percentage for 2 turns at the end of every turn. So, quite possibly one of the cheese strats I've seen for this and for the Christian dungeon. Run 2 Clouds. Rotate this 4 out of every 7 turns, and then you got some other damage mitigation skills on your other heroes. Hey, it might work, especially if you run that crazy curse team. He also has that Veil of Phantasm. Call allies for 1 turn when he's affected by Ghost Girl. That's a mitigation for everybody. That could be potentially very powerful. Now, Christian's a solid recommend in this dungeon. On his 1, gonna buff his own damage, increase his own crit chance. 2, reveal weakness. That's gonna make auto crit for everyone that hits that target for 1 turn. 3, increase all target skill cooldowns. If that works on, say, the spiders or whatever, maybe Sid, then that's less you have to deal with the AoEs in this dungeon. Remove all buffs can be solid as well. Each buff applied to the caster deals additional 20% damage. So you run him with Leafa, instantly 60% additional damage along with his own self buff, possibly 80% damage. Rue, abnormal status immunity, 100% bonus damage. It goes on and on and on. So if you've been building up your Christian, if you got one, he can be a solid choice here. And then whenever he launches a crit strike, he has a chance to put healing over time on himself for 2 turns, 20%. Also has a chance every time he crits to grant damage immunity. Shields are really good in this dungeon. Decreased debuff duration of all light allies if you happen to run in some light allies. That could be really good. So Christian's a solid recommend. Now we'll get to the SR heroes and I'll probably stop there. There are going to be some R heroes at work, such as, let's see, Ronan. Ronan could probably do pretty good. Jerome might have some issues, but he could probably be pretty solid. Now let's go over, just because I skip over someone, guys, doesn't mean if you have them built up that they might not work. It's just I don't have too many of these SR heroes built up, so I'm going to go over the ones I know are good for sure. Esmeralda, the crit queen. Crit damage. She has passively, once you get her 60, 50% additional crit damage, especially on counters. She's going to counterattack whenever she takes crit damage, so that can potentially screw you up with the mental seal in here. Puts up bleeding, so if you have a Morrigan, that's going to help Morrigan's DPS every time she attacks a bleeding target. She's going to buff her own damage. Yeah, you probably don't want to use her 2 in here. Just saying. But just a solid overall hitter, so if you happen to be running, like I said before, Christian, she's going to be doing some ridiculous deeps if you can keep her up. If you're running a water team, you remember how I skipped Marduk earlier, consider Karolina for your tank. Karolina is going to be putting up shields on her 1. It's a little shield, but it's still damage mitigation. On her 2, she has an Insta-Taunt. Insta-Taunt's really nice. No chance on hit on Insta-Taunt. Grants a shield to herself equal to 50% of their HP. Have the caster's HP for 2 turns. Removes all debuffs. That can be really gnarly depending on what debuffs are up on a 4-turn cooldown. And this right here hits all enemies. Also has a chance to decrease attack damage. Her passive, she has a resolve upon fatal damage. And she's going to restore allies' health, depending on if they have poison or anti-heal debuff. And grants a shield to an ally equal to 50% of their max HP for 2 turns when they take damage that causes their HP to drop below 50%. So if you happen to have her, you don't have a solid tank, give her a try. She's gonna, for the beginning crisis mode, usually happens on round 1, maybe round 2 of the battle, depending on how far you get with it. She's gonna go ahead and bring up your mitigation a lot just because of her shielding. So she's a solid recommend, especially if you're running a water team. Karolina, or not Karolina, I just went over her. Your girl Cordelia. The issue with Cordelia, she's wind, so she'll be taking a little bit more damage. Is that right? No, she won't, my bad, the water tank will. So, Karolina, the cool thing about her, I was wrong about that, by the way. The cool thing about her, she has a taunt with a cone attack. She has damage immunity on her 2 on a 4-turn cooldown. You can skill it up to 2 turns, but it's a 1 charge though, so skilling it up to 2 turns, unless it works differently from what it says, kind of doesn't make sense. But it can also consume Syrian Rage stacks to grant shield. The target's max HP for 2 turns. That can be really good for the group. For the group? I'm not sure if that's for the group or for her. I'll check one time. But either way, however it works, it's still good. On her ultimate, you know, if you choose to use it, you got three charges. Has a chance to stun, defense down buff. And then she's getting her Syrian Rage stacks, and as you know, she's the best passive heal tank in the game, just merely because of her 60. Hopefully she doesn't get poison or anti-heal debuff, but if you need some regen on a wind hero, she's going to do you solid, so recommendation there. Now, here's a chance. If you happen to be running a water team, you got a buff enough water team, you don't have a Karen, you don't have a Demos, consider Ica. Ica, she has some charm, so if you're running Surdic, 30% chance to charm an enemy at the beginning of the wave. And then on her 2, decrease damage taken by an ally and 2 adjacent allies, basically 3 target. And restore HP. Her 3, highly underrated, increases max HP for 2 turns. That can be really good. Depending on how fat you get it, you can get up to 50% HP along with a big fat heal. And the cooldown is 6 turns, which usually for a heal that fat, it's usually at least 7 turns. And then her 60, you know, she has a resolve. Decreased damage taken for the first 2 rounds. Oh, excuse me, for 2 turns if any ally takes fatal damage, guaranteed. Gonna take fatal damage for most people that run this dungeon. And restore 50% HP, so that could be pretty gnarly there. So she's a solid recommend. Now, if you're running a dark team, most likely, you know, by now, guys, you got a Rue, you got a Ramu, whatever. But if you don't, consider Esther. Esther right here. She's the only dark hero from what I know in the game that's a healer. Support unit, basically. You know, she increases recovery amount, so depending on if the debuffs are up, that can be good. Revives up to 2 allies. 7-turn skill cooldown, so that's an issue. But if you happen to need to run an all-dark team, this is a dark hero with revive, so you can potentially run her. Maybe with a Demos or whatever, if you need 2 supports. Decreases damage taken from AoE attacks. That is huge against the last pack, because the last pack does lots of 5 target damage. And, you know, a self-revive, so she's got some longevity in her. Let's see here. Saya is a hot recommend. Saya you can use in phase 2 to hit the snake really hard, because the snake is dark element, but keep in mind, Saya, even a really buff Saya is going to take a lot of damage and most likely die in this dungeon. Ghost Girl, very likely to be procced in the first encounter. But, you know, if you got a Rue, if you got some revives going, just get her up, have her ult a gun. You know, sleep is a viable debuff in this dungeon on the spiders. And she has Ghost Girl to protect her for a little bit. One time in the battle. Otherwise, you know, we're gonna get into like Advent heroes and stuff. That's your choice, guys. I did an Advent hero video if you want to see some of the Advent hero skills. But let's see here. Alfred, not a bad light tank. The only issue with Alfred is his chance taunt is on a 1 target. Although this also has a chance to taunt on his 2, but it's a 4-turn cooldown. It's up to 3 people. And then, you know, you got a stun on his ultimate. He has a self-stacking buff that restores HP when attacked. So potentially that can be great if the debuff's not up. Once per battle has a shield there, so potential. Not a solid hard recommend. Aristo would actually be pretty solid if you run a light team and you got all his skills. Quick recap on Aristo. He can stack up to 100 lustrous energy for every lustrous energy he has. He's increasing his damage up to 50%. You're getting a bunch more depending on how much you're skilling up his skills here. This dude is a terror in PvP most people don't use. Also an anti-revive hero, by the way. So he consumes lustrous energy on his 2 and his 3 for additional attack on his 2. And also on his 3 attack on top of the 300 or 480%, depending on how high you got it. He will do an additional up to 50% attack that ignores defense. So the only issue with this guy is he needs to attack a lot to get lustrous energy, and as we know in this dungeon, sometimes you just gotta pass turns because You have Mental Seal on you. Another underrated tank here, if you happen to have Liberto, go ahead and give him a try. Liberto is really cool because he has a brand on his one. He's putting shields up and has insta-taunt to all enemies. Okay, all enemies on his 2. That is really gnarly. And then on his 3, he's attacking everyone. Recover amount really doesn't matter, but unfortunately, he has counterattack here. Just passively. Immune to damage for 2 turns when allies' HP drops below 50 twice per battle, so that can be really potentially game-saving. If you're gonna get wiped by the snake or one of the spiders or whatever in the first couple packs. Resolve, you know, grants shield equal to 30% of HP to all allies, excluding the caster for 2 turns once Resolve is activated. Only once per battle, but that's pretty solid. So, you know, you can consider him. Now, there's heroes that I miss that, depending on your synergy, you can run. You know, some of the 3-star advents. Julie wouldn't be terrible. Renta, I think that's Renta, right? Yeah, he wouldn't be terrible if you happen to be running Poison Wind or whatever, but, you know, the majority of the dungeon is when there is a dark, really hard-hitting snake in pack 2. So keep that in mind. I also don't know who the other bonus hero is, but I'm pretty sure it's a fire unit. I'm sure someone will chime in the comments for that, because I didn't run it first time. So, but those are your recommendations right now for heroes that are pretty decent in this dungeon. Go ahead and share your own experiences if you have a combination that worked for you, maybe a hero I didn't mention, maybe you want to elaborate on a hero, or some hero synergies, whatever you got going on, guys. Let's help each other get Sid, because Sid is... In fact, you know what, let me bust Sid out. I know I kind of teased it earlier, but I'll show you guys why Sid. Sid is one of the top heroes in this game for support. Wind, clearly. So on his 1... Actually, I did kind of go over Sid, didn't I? My bad. Well, I'll go over it more in depth here, if, you know. So on his 1, you know, your typical heal, single target, but has a chance... It does not have a chance, sorry. 100% chance to remove target's debuff. So pretty solid there. 2, decrease skill cooldowns and a cone. A 3 target, basically. Restores health, so that's pretty solid. 3, revives an ally and restores 40% of their HP, decrease target skill cooldowns on a 7-turn cooldown. That's pretty solid, decreasing skill cooldowns. Fluttering Feathers is a stacking buff. Pretty much, once you get this, he always starts with 3 Fluttering Feathers, which means he basically always, at the beginning of a fight... Is that battle or encounter? Start of the wave, yeah. So at the start of the wave, he's going to grant a shield... See here, consumes all floating feathers to grant a shield equal to 30% of HP to all allies. I believe it's your ally's HP, not necessarily his HP, but I could be wrong on that. But pretty much you got a big fat shield that's going to absorb damage at the beginning of the fight. So really good character. You know, Rue counters him pretty hard, but otherwise pretty solid character here. And then... You know, he has a chance to do damage immunity with lowest HP at the start of a turn. So that's pretty nice for a passive, 30% chance. And then has a self-revive. Damage immunity to all allies for a turn, increase allies' critical strike chance and attack when an ally's HP drops below 30% once per battle. So that could be a solid help. So Sid is just a really... You could put him right up there with Ryu, right up there with Ramu as one of the top supports with a revive in this game. So... Definitely, guys. I know if you're newer, this dungeon is actually pretty hard. I got a dungeon video guide you can go check out. That'll give you the basics of what goes on in the dungeon. And good luck to everyone trying to get a Sid. You know, and then I'm sure hopefully we'll have at least 2 weeks. So even if you can't handle the dungeon right now, even with a friend's character, you know, just keep building up, you know, build your Leafa, build your Morrigan, whatever you got, whatever you want to work on. We'll get some recommendations in the comments there, and hopefully, you know, before the week's out, or at least before the event's out, you guys will have your very own Sid to play with. And then Sid is core for lots of PvE dungeons, including Cali, which will hopefully come back sometime this next month here. So Sid is a gigantic help in that dungeon, but I've ranted on long enough, so twitch.tv/Showtimedr if you want to see me on Twitch. You found my YouTube, check the comments, we got a Discord if you're a cool person. you know, come in, share your experiences, share your highs and lows, get some advice, give some advice, whatever you got. So we got a Knights Chronicle tab. And I will catch you guys later. Peace.